Well, good morning, YouTube friends and family, and welcome to today's canning edition of the Wellness Homesteader. So today you find me in my rather cluttered kitchen getting ready to process tomatoes. So I thought I would bring you along for the journey because I'm actually going to cold pack the tomatoes and just use whole pieces of tomato with no liquid. So over here on the stove, you can see that I have a pot of boiling water. In the sink, I have 25 pounds of cleaned, washed tomatoes. And what I'm going to do is I am going to use my big scooper, and I will put a link in the description box below. And I am going to dip my tomatoes in for about a minute till the skins get loose. Then immediately put them in the sink on this other side with cold water. And then those skins should slip off easily. So then I will core them and then continue prepping. So stay tuned. All right, well, I wanted to let you all know that I am following the USDA Complete Guide to Home Canning. Section 3 is all about tomatoes. Into each well-washed quart jar, I've placed a half teaspoon of citric acid, 1 teaspoon of pickling salt according to their instructions. So what I have here are 14, I can usually get 7 in my pan at a time, 14 tomatoes that I am going to cold pack. So the jars are cold, the tomatoes are cold, and the canner is still cold. So here's my knife. This is kind of a messy process, I fully admit it. I like to just quarter the tomatoes. I've already peeled and cored them. And then just start filling in the jar. And when the jar gets near the top, I will start to squish them down because I am not going to be using any liquid in these tomatoes. So cold pack, no liquid is the recipe that I'm using. I believe it's on page 3-11. So I started with 25 pounds of tomatoes, which is not a full 12 quarts. It's usually about 10 or 11. So we'll just have to see how many we get. And now that my jar is packed, you can see there's lots of space. So what you want to do is start to squish it down in there. And we're looking for about a 1/2 inch head space. And I'll tell you how many tomatoes. Of course, it depends on what size your tomatoes are. I just continue to add pieces. And that is about perfect on headspace. So, the next thing you want to do is take your debubbler and really get in there and make sure that you have all of your air bubbles out. Even though it looks like everything's nicely compressed, I always get air bubbles out almost without fail. All right. So here's what our beautiful jar of tomatoes look like. I am going to take a paper towel. I'm going to dip it in vinegar, wipe the rim, and then let me grab my lids and rings. And I still heat my lids and rings, although it says I'm running out of space here, guys. Can you tell? Although it says it's no longer necessary. I still do it. So let me fish around in here. And I'm going to place the lid and then the ring just finger tight and into the canner. I don't know why I'm using a jar lifter because everything's cold, but I'm gonna start loading my Ball Fresh Tech electric canner. And once, I'm just going to continue to repeat this until the canner's full. So I will bring you back in just a moment to show you how things are progressing. Stay tuned. Well, here in my Fresh Tech Ball electric canner, you can't see the jars because I put the device that kind of holds the jars down below the water level in place. I have 6 quarts of cold packed tomatoes, and this will take quite a while for it to come up to the boil point, and then I will begin timing for 90 minutes just to share with you, I have 6 quarts in the kettle, 3 quarts in a pint was the remainder. And because I am cold packing, I will have to drain the hot water from the canner, let it cool, and start all over again to process the second batch. Or alternatively, I could do it on top of the stove at the same time. I will probably just use my Ball Tech electric canner. To me, it puts less heat in the house than it does to do it on top of the stove. So beautiful, gorgeous, lovely cold packed tomatoes, and this is just a little of the salt and citric acid. I will let it process for 90 minutes for my altitude, sit for 10 with the lid off and the canner off, and then at the very end, I'll show you my bounty. Our 90 minutes in our canner has elapsed, so I just wanted to share with you what I do if you're using a Fresh Tech canner. So the first thing I did was turn the canner off. Simple, right? I've pulled the lid. Now I am going to pull the metal grate that helps keep your jars properly submerged with the proper tool. So this does, sometimes when you have quart jars, it can be a bit tricky. A very easy way to do it is take a fork. Just be careful, the water's super hot. And I've set my timer. I'm just pulling it up by the loop and dropping it into my drainer grate. I've set my timer for 10 minutes, and at the end of 10 minutes, I'll begin pulling my jars out. When you pull jars out of the canner, the recommendation is that you pull your jar straight up like yay. Don't try to drain or tip the water off. Put them immediately onto your canning mat or protected countertop space, and then leave them undisturbed for 24 hours. You should have sealing as those jars cool down. What I do find with the cold packed tomatoes, and it was a little bit different for me because this is only the second time, the first year I've cold packed tomatoes, is that because those have been in the canner for 90 minutes plus the additional 10 minutes, they take a longer time to seal. So don't get discouraged. Don't play with the button on the top. Leave those tomatoes sit. And then if you have a seal failure, one of them doesn't seal, you can simply refrigerate it and use it right away. I'm going to pause again for a second, and I will bring you back when we have this canner full of tomatoes pulled. First batch of quart cold packed tomatoes out of the canner. So one disadvantage, I guess you could say, of doing cold pack when you're using the same canner is I now have to drain that hot water off, let the canner come back to a cool temperature, refill it with cold water to process my last 4 jars. However, I will say how beautiful, I don't want to disturb these, but how gorgeous are these? And the liquid that you see at the bottom is not any liquid that I added. It's simply the natural juice of the tomato. So very pleased. There's smoking hot out of the canner, so none have sealed yet. It will take a bit of time. I'm going to continue on processing tomatoes, and we'll bring you back at the end to show you the final result. While I'm waiting on the last canner of tomatoes to come up to temperature and start to boil, I thought I would bring you a little quick recipe that is a healthy treat. I don't know if you've noticed, I am shocked. It's July and I'm already seeing all things fall in the decorating aspect of like a Walmart and just a lot of advertisements for back to school, which I know is next month. So I thought this recipe is something I will share with you because it would be a good back to school recipe. So I'm going to teach you how I make chewy granola bars. To start, I have grabbed a 9x9. That just happens to be the dimensions of my pan. You could certainly use 8x8. And I am just putting some parchment paper because this is a very sticky mixture. And this is actually no bake. It's not no cook, but it's no bake. So into my pot, here, I have put 2 tablespoons of organic coconut oil. And let me just say, you can go as extreme or as mild as you want as far as the components you're putting into this and the level of organic versus non-organic. To this, 2 tablespoons of coconut oil, I'm going to add 3/4 a cup of a combination of peanut butter and then creamy almond butter. This particular almond butter has no salt or sugar, so that is why I chose to add a little bit of peanut butter in there to keep the mixture from being too dry. All right, next thing you want to add is 1/2 cup of honey. I personally have not used agave. I forget, you just push that up. Yep. I now have 2 of these lovely push-up measuring cups and they're great. You want to take this over to your stove and over a watchful medium heat, bring it up to a simmer, let it simmer for 1 minute, and then we will come back and begin adding it to our dry ingredients. Get it pressed in the pan, and quick as that, you will have some granola bars. So while our honey, coconut oil, and nut butters are heating over sort of a medium heat, I'm going to quickly tell you what dry ingredients you need to get together. So the original recipe called for 2 1/4 old-fashioned oats, not quick oats. You can use quick oats, but it's much chewier, much better and much better for you if you get the steel cut organic old-fashioned oats. To that, it said add 1 cup of nuts. Well, y'all know I never follow recipes. So what I actually have put in here are, it's probably easier to show you this way, sunflower seeds. I'm not gonna lift it. These are raw almonds. I put some raisins. I also put some, just opening that nicely vacuum sealed jar, some raw pumpkin seed, which I put in my cast iron skillet and just toasted them lightly. So all kinds of protein goodness. And now I am going to add some of my home dried apple bits from last fall. You know, I realized I did a lot of things with apples last year, but I didn't really share a whole lot of it. So hopefully I will do a better job this year. And then I will just reseal those. Once our heated mixture comes to temperature, we're going to add a teaspoon of vanilla, about 1/2 teaspoon of sea salt, and then we'll pour this together and press it in the pan. Our heated mixture has been simmering for about a minute, and I also wanted to share I am using the raw honey from Pfeiffer Orchard. You can see, well, there you go, that it's kind of gone to sugar. So what I like to do is gently heat it in a pan of warm water rather than to just blast it with heat with the microwave so that it does retain all of its good properties. So I'm going to add a splash here of vanilla and a dash of sea salt. You can feel free to measure. And I have to tell you, I tasted this. It is amazing. As always, I love the combination of peanut and almond butter. Let me just start scraping all of this delicious goodness into our dry ingredients. One good thing about using cast iron cookware is it will help your arm muscles tremendously. Clean this a little better because you do need all of that liquid to really make the mixture come together. I did leave out my oats and my raw almonds just in case I decide that I would like to or need more of either of those 2 ingredients. All right, so this is what we have, and you just start mixing. Believe me, this smells good enough to just get a spoon and start eating before it even gets nice and chilled in the fridge. So you do want to work pretty quickly because the butters, as they cool, will start to kind of get hard and make it a little harder for you to stir, but This doesn't look like I added too much dry ingredient. If you're way off, you could always make just a quick little melt of probably just the peanut butter and honey or the almond butter and honey without it being a really big problem. Okay. So, got one little dry pocket here. There we go. I'm about to get in there with my hand because it's honestly a little easier. Okay. So these are great. They freeze well, I can tell you that. You can freeze them for up to 6 months. I've frozen them. They don't usually last very long here. So you could add, if your children are totally anti just nuts and fruit, and of course it goes without saying, and I'm just pressing this into the pan. If there's nut allergy or nut allergy rules about lunch packing, if your children are attending school, you want to be mindful of that. This might be a better after school snack if that is the case. So you want to compress this as hard as you can into that parchment paper before you put it in to chill it. So your bars do come out nice and even. You could use a glass like this to press it, but I think I'm just going to use my hand. It's a little sticky, but it's not horrible. So these are going to be amazing. If you don't want to add a lot of, I'll say, processed food like chocolate chips or butterscotch chips or other types of chips, you could melt a very small amount with a little bit of coconut oil, so it'll be good pouring consistency, and do a little drizzle on the top. I'm not a chocolate fan, so I don't feel like I need the chocolate. And these are very hearty and filling, so I don't think it needs it, but I do believe the original recipe said to add chocolate chips. All right. So I think we've got a pretty good flatten out. Let me share that with you. Ugh. I haven't been out of the kitchen all day today, guys. We're having another day of rain in Ohio. So every day that it rains is one day I don't have to bucket water the garden. So I'm always happy about that. My tomatoes are coming on, my homegrown tomatoes are coming on full force. So I am not by any stretch done with tomato things. So here is our finished granola bars. Oh, guys, it smells amazing. It smells like candy to me. I'm gonna pop these in the fridge. These should harden up and be ready for cutting just about the time the canner finishes. So I will bring you back at the very end and we'll do a taste test. Well, we are finally finished with all of our tomato canning. So ended up with 9 quarts, 1 pint. All of our first batch that we did together has sealed. Yes, I just took the others out. And I want to share with you, look at these gorgeous, gorgeous granola bars. Now, I've already eaten one, so I'm just going to take a little bite so that I don't eat too much of them. They're chewy, soft, creamy. The nut butter really comes through. Not overly sweet, but sweet enough to really taste like a treat. So I hope you've enjoyed today's video. If you haven't already, please go ahead and smash that like button. And hey, if you're not subscribed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and then ring the bell to be notified of all the new videos. As always, be healthy, be well, be blessed, and I'll see y'all very soon. Take care.